Rodney, welcome into the game, man. What's on your mind?
Man, you got it down, don't you?
Yeah, man. I'll tell you. Hey, Rodney, it's hard to believe from when I was being recruited to just what you did in 95, 96 time frame by the time you went public till now is just absolutely amazing. Today I have to start off by asking you this question since you're in the media. Nick Saban makes an announcement, don't report what you see. Is that a big deal or not?
You know what? Here's the deal. Here's exactly, and let me be clear. This was coming through Josh Maxson, the media relations. He just said, listen, guys, we don't want you to come in and report injuries that, basically until Coach Saban comments on them. And that's pretty much the way it had been for years and years and years. And then it kind of changed. People just, there really didn't seem to be a real policy on what we saw in terms of guys out there in black jerseys.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't take it as necessarily that big of a deal. I think what Coach Saban was really, what he has in mind is, let's say you walk out there and you see Cam Robinson in a, just in a black jersey. Well, he may comment on it after practice, but I don't think he wants everybody to go out there and say, okay, I saw Cam Robinson, this one, that one, and the other one in black jerseys. Just, I think he wants to try to control that a little bit more.
Right.
And hey, Martin, when Mike Dubose was here, the rule was this. You don't say anything about practice, period. The only thing you say is what he tells you to say. In other words, the questions that he addresses after practice, that's all you can talk about. That's the way it was for years and years and years. So,
wow.
Anyway,
yeah,
that's just...
I didn't think it was that big of a deal, and like you said, I'd heard that it was kind of more about injury, and Aaron comes back and says that later after the firestorm,
Yep.
But in the beginning it was like, oh, don't say what you see. And the reason that's important, Rodney, is you're at the beginning of practice. The black jersey may mean that one drill out of the whole practice, they're going to hold Cam out, One-on-one, he may be live, full speed contact, but when they go scrimmage, he may not. And you don't know that.
Sure.
And so you report, oh, man, he's injured because he had a black jersey. Well, it wasn't. It was injured. They just rested him and making sure that he's good. So
that, and also another thing I think that I know Coach Saban does not like this at all, is when you go out there and you view practice for 10 minutes, and it's not practice really. It's
right.
just them going through positional drills. And people go out there and say, this guy's running with the first team, that guy's running with the first team. And guess what? This guy who's been a starter for 2 years wasn't running with the first team today. And they put that as a big headline, and it's a mislead. It's these things, they work different players in different spots to get a look at them, to evaluate maybe combinations or whatever it is, say on the offensive line. And it's really not that big of a deal. And I think that's the thing he's been talking about is you guys go out there and report all this stuff, and half of it's not true.
Right.
So anyway,
well,
I understand.
Cornwell, not mentioned, was the darling coming out of spring.
Yep.
Coker,
yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Barnett getting better. Two other guys, Bateman and Morris, nice job. Is there anything to that we can read into that may come to fruition tomorrow?
Well, again, I think whatever happens tomorrow, we'll just have to wait and see. But I do think that the noticeably absent mention of not mentioning Cornwell's name, certainly that's something that catches your ear. I think that obviously we've talked about how he did help himself in the spring, and he hasn't appeared to have a great fall just, when you have an opportunity to watch him throwing in those preliminary drills. And then I guess he did okay in the scrimmage but again, Coach Saban didn't address it. It looks like, or it sounds like, he's fallen down the list a little bit for whatever reason. I wouldn't want to speculate on why, but it looks like, he's kind of not in the position of, maybe where he was coming into camp or leaving spring practice. And another thing I caught from that quote or that comment there, and you probably picked up on it yourself, Martin, is Alec Morris has been here 4 years now almost, and Coach Saban is still struggling to learn as Alec, not Alec.
I did pick up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is Alec, A-L-E-C. But let me ask you something about this. That whole thing. You know, you've watched a lot of football and a lot of practice, Rodney, and seeing guys come in, you know, at different levels. Is it possible that Blake Barnett is making this push now even more so because he's now actually getting to throw with the guys who would be with the first team?
Yeah, I think he's done really well with his reps with the first team from everything you can gather from practice, people, observers, and all those. And a lot of people go to practices. A lot of people, were at the scrimmage last week, and they talk about how, even though he struggled in the scrimmage, he really appeared to be the guy with the most poise. Just had a natural feel for what he was doing, maybe more so than the other guys. But I think when you talk to people, they'll tell you this guy potentially is an outstanding prospect. Maybe one of the better quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback, just potentially, that Alabama has signed in a long, long time. He kind of seems to me to have that A.J. McCarron type, confidence, swagger about him a little bit. A.J. this was never too big for A.J.
Right.
It did not bother him. To play quarterback at Alabama, it can't bother you. It can't get the best of you. You have to realize, let stuff slide off your back, be able to handle it, and be confident that, in your abilities. And I think he's got that kind of aura about him that kind of rubs off on people. And he's got a lot of ability. He's a good athlete. He is a good quarterback.
Bruce Feldman with Fox Sports wrote an article today, why Alabama can win the playoff. And it was that they're bigger and more athletic than anybody they play. Rodney, is with this team, is quarterback the biggest concern, or is there other units that needs to perform at a high level and almost insulate the quarterback, whether it be offense, defense, or special teams?
Well, I think that's going to be part of it. I think the other spots are going to have to take care of the quarterback a little bit. I mean, to me, I think that, and Coach Saban has basically said that. I mean, I said on Insider TV a couple of weeks ago that I don't think they're looking for a guy to win the game. I think they're looking for one not to lose it. Meaning that you manage the offense, you don't put your team in bad positions, you don't turn the football over, and you do what you can to help the team win. And just don't turn it over. And I think that's key number one right there. But, yeah, obviously, I think all of those things you mentioned are going to have to go into it. I mean, you're going to have to get really good offensive line play. I think the running game is going to be very important this year. Obviously the defense, and I think they're going to be vastly improved because I think the secondary is going to be better. I'm very impressed with, a lot of those young players and the development that they've made. And I think, Mel Tucker's probably had a big part in that. I think he was a great hire by Nick Saban, and I think you're going to see the dividends here in the fall with that group because I think personally they're probably going to be the most overall improved group on the team. I think they will.
And speaking of that, stay in that vein. A couple guys that are getting some high praise. Of course, we're looking for big things from Tony Brown, Marlon Humphrey. If they can stay healthy, they have the bodies of a Greek god, but it doesn't seem to be cooperating with them. But other than those two guys, I think they're going to get in the mix. You're hearing a lot of talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick and Ronnie Harrison. Are those guys going to be able, as true freshmen, to get out there on the field and help us?
Martin, it would not surprise me if Minkah Fitzpatrick starts, or at least in some packages. It would not surprise me if he started. I mean, he's done that well. And I think he had a couple of picks in the scrimmage last week, and he's really just apparently a real talent. He's been outstanding in camp. And Ronnie Harrison was here in the spring. He showed a lot of promise then, and I think he's the next future great player as a safety here. As time goes on, I think he has all the tools, his size, his speed, his athletic ability, his understanding of the game. He has a great understanding of the game from what I've gathered, that they really think he just picks things up really well. So I think number 15 is going to be a great player back there at the safety spot, in time. And I think you'll see him contribute pretty early. I don't know that he'll be a starter, but I think he'll certainly make a contribution pretty early on.
We could replace the greatest receiver who replaced the greatest receiver with another kid. I'm just asking that question because when we had Julio Jones, he was the best to ever play here, I think.
Yep.
And then Amari Cooper comes along and you go, wow.
I remember when they saw Amari in camp, Martin. And the word coming out of Alabama's camp was, that he was going to commit to Alabama. And when he did commit to Alabama, the word was that the Alabama coaching staff said, never did we think this soon after Julio Jones we would have a guy that could be that same kind of an impact player on the Julio level in terms of an impact, and even turned out to be greater in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's impossible, but if you want me to answer what I think now in terms of this year, I will, or if you want to wait till after the audio.
We'll wait till after the audio. Is it possible? Now, I'm not saying he can do it as a freshman, but is it possible that this kid could begin the same track that Amari was on as a freshman? Is this really kid? Does he have the potential to be in that pattern of what we've come to expect from Alabama wide receivers?
Well, I think he can be an outstanding player. I do. I think you'd probably, if you want to kind of compare him to Amari, you'd have to compare him to Amari as a freshman. And I don't know that he'd reach that level right now. I think, he can run really well. He's very quick, very fluid, explosive guy. I mean, he's got a great first step from what I've seen of him. So I think he has all the tools. Now, here's the question, though. He does not have A.J. McCarron 2012 throwing the football to him.
Correct.
So I think that's certainly that would limit him some. And I do think this, too. I think he's got some outstanding receivers that have been here that are really good players. Ardarius Stewart, I think, is going to be really, really good. I think Robert Foster has a chance to be really good. Those two guys were, A-Day MVPs. They shared it. And then Chris Black's been around a while. And I think the transfer, Richard Mullaney out of Oregon State, is really going to, be a solid contributor this year. So I'm not really sure that, because of those reasons, I'm not really sure that, Ridley will make that impact right away. But I think down the road he has a chance to be, be a really dynamite player. Is
it possible, Rodney, that you just that list, we're looking at new productivity, but is it possible as a unit that this wide receiver core, with the injection of Kenyon Drake, could they be the most important unit on this team when you got a young quarterback?
Well, I think certainly that, those guys are going to be important. And I think Drake's versatility is going to, now he's a guy that I think could have a really big year. I think he's the one that could be extremely productive in a lot of different ways because you can use him in the slot. You can line him up at outside wide. You can move him back to running back where, of course, where he originated at. And so you can just move him in so many positions. You could even allow him to return kickoffs if they want. So, because I think he could be a great weapon doing that. I just think he could be the real playmaker of the offense this year. I think Kenyon Drake, I don't want to say like Amari, but I think he could be the guy that's the real playmaker that makes the big plays that helps Alabama win games. And, overall, though, going back to that wide receiver core, here's what I think in terms of replacing Amari. I just think that all of those guys as a group, might be able to contribute and offset some of the loss that you had with Amari. Again, nobody's going to replace him, but all those guys as a group may be, helpful in putting up some good numbers and making this a productive unit. And I also think keep an eye on O.J. Howard this year. He could become a little bit more important in terms of the passing game, or he could become more of a focal point. That'll be an interesting one to watch.
And I've said that I think that Kenyon Drake is in the caliber of Reggie Bush. I think we saw the flashes of that before he got hurt last year, and I predicted that he won't have as many receiving yards, but I think his total yards and contribution will, without a shadow of a doubt, put him in that Amari Cooper total yard category for the year.
Well, I think even Lane Kiffin calls him Reggie Bush too. Okay. So, he coached Reggie.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think the kid's special. He's been one of my favorite players because he reminds me of a guy I played with, Derek Lassick. He just doesn't realize that he's not 250 pounds. And so he hits everything like it's just there's no stopping him. And so if you don't get him at the line, he's gone. And that's what he's so explosive, and I can't wait to see that. I'm going to talk about a kid. You know, we talked about Coach mentioning Alec Morris. Is Alec Morris potentially, because he's now getting more conversation, is he potentially mentally the guy that Saban feels like he can trust? And does the fact that he has one of his best defenses and he's going to have I think one of the better offensive linemen, even though we're replacing starters, I think the offensive line has the potential to be better. Mm-hmm. And we got a game changer at punter. Are those three things working together possibly going to elevate a guy like Alec Morris who can – you remember David Smith?
Oh, yeah.
Never should have – I mean, I shouldn't say never. You never saw him being the starter, but he just didn't make mistakes, and he was smart on the field. Is that possibly what we see happening with Alec Morris?
I like Alec Morris. I've always liked him. You know, he played at a great program in Texas and was a very successful high school quarterback. And, you know, a lot of people may not remember this. He was originally committed to Wake Forest, and Alabama got him here in camp, and he had a really good camp, and Alabama took him. And I've always liked Alec Morris. I think he's got a good arm. He's got he gets the ball out pretty quickly, and, you know, we just really haven't seen enough of him in a game-type situation to really make many determinations. Now maybe the coaching staff obviously is put him in those situations, and they have a better feel for him. But I think Alec Morris is certainly a really good candidate, and I think he could be the guy that emerges among the whole group because, again, I go back to this. You said it. Nick Saban wants to trust the guy, not to make mistakes.
Right.
All right. I think that's probably just and again, I'm not. This is not personal. This is just observations that I think that's probably the biggest thing with Jacob Coker. I mean, he has all the talent. He's got a lot of tools. It's just a matter of, can he be consistent and manage the team consistently, not turn the ball over, not make mistakes, key mistakes. And for example, last year, I don't remember the second game of the season, whatever, when he was playing, it was right before halftime, and he's in his fourth year in college, and he takes a sack right before halftime, and they don't even get a field goal out of it.
Correct.
I mean, that's pretty basic right there. If you ask me, that just tells me, does this guy, or makes me think, does this guy have a feel for the game?
Right.
I mean, does he have an understanding of the game? And that's not being critical. That's just saying, when you're evaluating a player quarterback, you have to kind of answer those kinds of questions. And so those are the kind of things that I think, he has to prove that he can manage the team. And I think Alec Morris, if he can do that, certainly I think he could be he's a really strong candidate in my opinion. I just don't think my feeling is that, Nick Saban is very reluctant to start a true freshman, and which means Blake Barnett, he may eventually start this year. I'm not sure he'll start the Wisconsin game. I'm not sure he would start him if Coker couldn't play, for example. Mm-hmm. I'm just not sure that they would put him in that position. But I think he's worth watching.
Wow. Hey, well, Rodney, you like I said, you've been around the game, and your recruiting prowess also helps you look kind of at these kids and the progression of their talent, because you start looking at kids as like freshmen and stuff and predicting where they're going to be, 4 years later. Kind of who do you see as the breakout player potentially? I think you may have hinted at who you thought it may be earlier, but who do you see as that breakout player for this year's edition of the Crimson Tide?
Are you talking about on the team as a whole, or are you talking about the young guys?
Just as a whole. It could be an upperclassman, it could be a freshman, or anyone that you think that we're not really talking about or expecting, but it could really have a breakout year.
Well, I'm going to tell you one guy, and I'm probably going to surprise you here. But I'm going to tell you a guy to keep an eye on the defensive line is Dalvin Tomlinson. And I think he might have been the best defensive lineman in the spring. And you're talking about all those guys.
Yeah.
And Dalvin Tomlinson is a guy that, not a lot of people have talked about. But I think, he had a great spring. I think he's a, tremendous athlete, has played a lot of different sports, was a really good soccer player, so he's athletic. And I just think the injuries have kind of slowed him down a little bit, but I would say keep an eye on him on the defensive line. I think, hopefully, I really believe that if he can stay healthy, this is Reuben Foster's opportunity to really kind of blossom. I think Christian Miller, Rashawn Evans, Tim Williams as pass rushers, 1, 2, all three of those guys certainly are guys to kind of keep an eye on. And like I mentioned earlier, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Ronnie Harrison, and I know I mentioned a lot of guys.
No, that's fine.
These are guys that I think, can really kind of step up. And I tell you, it's interesting that Marlon Humphrey, I thought he had a really good spring. And I thought that Marlon Humphrey last year from the fall to the spring when I saw him physically, had probably made as much improvement, physically,
right,
as anybody.
I agree.
When you're talking about how his body matured and how, the progress he made. And then I thought he appeared to have a really good spring. And then he, was injured here at the beginning of the camp, but he's kind of starting to come around. He's been running some with the ones in certain packages, and he's a guy that certainly is worthwhile watching too. And another guy I want to mention offensively is before we change the subject or whatever. I want Damian Harris. I think has an opportunity to make a really good contribution this year, and I think because of the situation with both Scarborough being out at least until October and coming off that injury, this kind of opens the door. And you've got Derrick Henry. You want to move Kenyon Drake around. You're going to play him a lot of different spots, and I think Damian Harris has a chance to really make a strong contribution. Maybe along the lines of something similar to what Mark Ingram could, in terms of that role that Ingram had as a freshman. I think you could see Damian Harris do something like that, and I think he's going to be a really special player before he's done.